with. And today we have Karen Somerville, who's bringing some really, it's content that no one's ever seen before. And so I'm really excited and proud to bring her here. More about that later. A moment about our sponsors. We don't have our sponsor sign, I don't know what that is. But Redmond Law Chartered. I got my partner Rich Lau here. You know, we represent business owners actively engaged in their business. Rich is the brains of the operation. I'm the eye candy that brings in the
Obviously.
Rich, in Wisconsin they don't have this designation, but in Minnesota they have a designation called real estate specialist. So in Minnesota there's 5,000 lawyers that call themselves real estate lawyers, me included. There's only about 300 that can legally call themselves a real estate specialist. And it's a test. You have to get like 10 references from basically people that were on the other side of deals with you, and then you get approved take a test and get approved by the Supreme Court. So that's a really big deal, and I think it gives us capabilities in our real estate practice that really in the Twin Cities, most of the real estate specialists are all with the big firms, so I think that distinguishes us, not me being like this. And then in the last few years, and this is really driven by what our clients are up to, we've done lots of employment stuff, and again, Rich is the one that's figured all that out, so I'm glad to have him.
What do you do?
As I said, I'm the eye candy I bring. So Rich gets this real estate certification, and I say, well, you may have the piece of paper, but when you really want the answer, you still come to me. Sure enough. Well, I got 30-some years of doing this stuff. So I also do Inner Circle with peer groups for business owners and do monthly meetings, and that's really cool. Pat Powers is here from Olson Thielen. Those of you that were here last month heard the introduction, but Olson Thielen is an amazing mid-sized accounting firm, very close personal relationships with their clients. What I like most about working with the folks at Olson Thielen is they're just so damn practical. And we have some issue. I had an issue that, frankly, I've talked to a number of accounting firms, and I interacted with the tax person at Olson Thielen and just came up with a genius solution that we've used many places. And it was all about dedication, figuring out what the client needed and figuring out a way to get it done. So thanks for sponsoring that. I'm glad you're here. So let's get this thing on the road. I mentioned Citizen, San Pedro catering again. One thing we did confirm that the lights are going to stay on for the whole time. So thanks for paying your bills. Change is a necessary but also high risk activity for your organizations. Research continues to show that organizational change experiences a failure rate of approximately 70%. So if your organization is going through some change, 70% of those organizations fail in implementing the change they were hoping to. There are a number of reasons for this high rate of failure, including the lack of organizational change skills assigned to these change initiatives. To succeed, you need people throughout your organization who don't just know about change, but they have the skills to lead, manage, and facilitate the change necessary. Karen Somerville has really dedicated her career to figuring out what those skills are and helping people figure out how to train and nurture those skills. So I'm very pleased and honored and grateful that Karen is here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you.
I was going to say that I invited this expert who wasn't available, but Karen's filling in. But
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks to all of you for being here. I just mentioned to Jeff a couple of minutes ago that Something that you may find interesting, and I'm certainly very proud of, is that a couple of months ago, my husband and I became U.S. citizens. We are from Canada. Thank you. And that's been part of, what did you do this summer? Well, I became an American citizen. So I'm very pleased to be here. And over on this side, I live in Edina, and don't get into Wisconsin much, but it was a great drive today, driving through all these fall colors, and I'm delighted to be here with you today, and really glad that you're here. As Jeff said, change continues to be one of the great challenges. It's a paradox. We're all going through it, all organizations, and yet far too often we're not successful enough with our change initiatives. And that's really a lot of what brought me to spending about the past 20 years taking a hard look at various aspects of change. So I'm going to talk today specifically around change skills. All right, and it's not a well understood concept. And what I would say to you is that from our own research, we do have published research in this area. As Jeff said, not a lot of people know about this, so I'm really hoping that in the next half hour or so, I'm going to share some information with you and some tips that you can take back to your workplace and start to work with this afternoon. This is not some highfalutin theory, I can talk theory, usually with the best of them. I'm really interested in practical information that can help you and your organizations move forward in a successful way. So what we started realizing as we took a look at change skills is that there are at least 11 of them. And I'm going to talk to you today about what they are. So in today's talk, I'm going to talk about why change skills are important. I'm going to talk about what the 11 sets of change skills are. And I'm going to give you some suggestions as how you and your organization can acquire them. So that's what you can expect from me in the next 30 minutes or so. Is that all right? Does that sound like an okay plan? All right. How many of you here are involved in change initiatives right now in your own organization? Let's quickly see your hands. All right, so most of you. How many of you here are consultants? So some of you are consultants. What's interesting about this, and you'll hear more about this as I go through my talk today, is that this information is relevant in all sectors. Public sector, private sector, government, nonprofit sector. I've worked in all those sectors. It's also relevant in all aspects of business, and our research really proves that. We went out and we talked to 120 people in different sectors, in different parts of the world. So I'm hoping that you will find, and I certainly believe this, that it doesn't matter where you're working in your organization, and this can apply to your church, if you're on a school board, they're all organizations, right? So this is highly relevant for everyone who's functioning in an organization. All right? I started out my career in the high technology sector. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and 2 decades ago, 25 years ago, when I started out in my career, Ottawa was the high-tech mecca in the United States, in Canada, similar to what you have in California, right? It's not like that anymore in Ottawa. They have had a downturn. But I can tell you that this is where I got my initial interest in change. In those days, I was working in the area of accounting and finance. And I worked my way up to vice president of finance in a large international company. So I was really focused on the numbers and trying to understand what was happening. And I realized that we were struggling with change. And we were in a high growth situation. And unfortunately, it started taking wild swings, and we started looking at downsizing. So that was my introduction to change, even though I was working in a different field at the time. All right? So from that, 20, 25 years ago, as I've been out working with different organizations, and I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, would agree today, that today change is a constant in organizations. We can't say, oh, I'm going to do my real job today, whatever that is, right? And I'll worry about change on Friday afternoon. It's all intertwined. It's a constant. And what we've seen is that it's become much more complex over the years, and it's going to continue to be more complex. But one thing that has been a constant is this failure rate that Jeff talked about earlier. 70% of change initiatives fail. And I started saying, come on folks, we've got to do better than this. Right? Look at all those wasted resources. So that was the beginning of my interest in change. I'm now out talking to organizations in different parts of mainly Canada and the United States. I do a little bit of Western Europe work, but mainly in Canada and the US. Far too often, I encounter this kind of a problem when I'm called in as a consultant to help them. You see the charts, profits have gone down, sales have gone down. They're sitting around a boardroom table, and the caption says, what if we don't change at all and something magical just happens? All right? Most of us are really tired of change. There's a syndrome called change fatigue. Just let my world stop. Let me do what I'm hired to do and stop all this noise. Right? But we know that we can't just shut it out. Or we see our charts and our businesses starting to look like this cartoon is suggesting. Right? There's no magic. We have to embrace change. We have to get better at it. And that's one of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today, is embracing the whole notion of change skills. So we know that change is difficult. There are lots of reasons why we have that 70% failure rate. It's complicated, right? And what I'm talking to you about today is just one slice of it. But we know, as those previous charts in the cartoon showed, if we don't change, our competition's going to take over. Who knows what's going to happen, but our numbers usually do this, right? So today you're going to hear me talking about change initiatives. So I want to stop for a second and ask you, think about a change initiative, and I'm going to just jot a couple of them down, and ask you for some suggestions. What's an example of a change initiative going on in your organization? Anybody?
Succession planning.
Ah, succession planning. Some people are going to be leaving. We have to get ready for that. Right? Yeah. Right? That can be a tough one, right? Who's going to fill those shoes tomorrow? Can we all get agreement on that? Probably not easily. Yeah.
Technology improvements.
Yeah, technology, right? Lots of technology change. Give me one more if you would, please. Anybody?
Regulatory?
That regulatory influence, right? What's that government doing to us today? All right? And we could go on and on and on. But those are three great examples. Here we're talking about direct people impact. The CEO, the CIO, somebody's leaving, or they may be leaving. We have to get ready for that. This technology, obviously, it's costing us a fortune, and we're having difficulty with it. I joke I can't spell IT, but a lot of my work relates to the technology change side of things. I'm not at all technical, but they bring me in to talk about the people side of things, right? So even though this is hard stuff, it's the people behind it that's the challenge. And yeah, we've got these external influences, such as regulatory. So three great examples. Thank you. The other thing to note with those examples is that there's different levels of complexity to each of them. And as I'm talking to you in the next 20, 25 minutes, and you're thinking about the change that's going on in your organization, and you're thinking about the skills that I'm going to be talking about, it has to make sense in terms of the complexity of the change. Talking about succession planning will probably involve a finite number of people, right? It's usually not organization-wide. You've got to get the people in the C-suite. If you're looking at succession planning for your C-suite, it's a limited number of people, but it's strategically important. Technology could be a new accounting system, or it could be enterprise-wide. Regulatory, again, could just impact a small piece of your business, or it could be, again, every aspect of your business. So as you're thinking about change in your organizations, please be thinking about how big is it, how many people will it impact, how long will it take. And this then helps us begin to understand the skills that are going to be required. Make sense? Okay? All right, so thank you. Those are examples of change initiatives for sure. So I'd like you just now, if you would take a minute and jot down what comes to your mind when you think of change initiatives in your organization. The top two. And this is just for your use only, but just jot it down for a second as you think about change going on. What's going on in your organization? What change initiatives? Just a minute. All right. Some of you could probably spend the afternoon doing this, right? When I work with organizations and they're saying they're having challenges with change, because I do general change work, and I say, what's going on? And the client will usually say, well, we've got new technology coming in. And I'll say, well, what else is going on? Start probing more. Ultimately, I want to get to something that looks like this for that organization. So what is this? This is what I call a bubble map. These are all change initiatives going on. This is actually a change initiative for one particular organization I worked with. So when I asked him to jot down what's going on, he came up with these top three. We're outsourcing our R&D, we're putting in a corporate-wide IT system, and we've got to do this thing called a culture change. So he talked about the top bubbles in his world, and I would suggest that for those of you who wrote some things down, they're probably the top bubbles in your world. But when I started probing further, look at all these other bubbles that opened up. Wow, there's a lot going on. And I didn't label them all, but he's doing a telephone system upgrade, he's opening an office in Dallas, he's got a new key team leader, etc., right? So what we also noted is that some of these are overlapping. All right, look at some of these bubbles are overlapping. What's going on there is that they're competing for time and resources. And there's conflict going on in the organization. Because people who are in charge of that corporate IT system, they're saying they can't get key people's time because they're all wrapped up in here. So it's helpful just to take an inventory of what really is going on in your organization. And do all the little bubbles too. And when I see something that starts looking busy like this and they're saying they're struggling, one of the first questions I ask is, what can you postpone? What can you put off to next quarter? Because you've got too much competition going on in here. Make sense? So most people don't think about a bubble map. They have some sense, but if you really seriously take a look at what's going on, you'll probably come up with something like that, right? So that's a huge learning and a bit of a red flag for us as we're thinking about why is this change, why are we not more successful with our change? This starts to tell that story, right? And as we've already talked about, this is the worst kind of change. We're going out of business. Obviously, we have to stop that, but this is the far extreme, right? So why do change initiatives fail? There are many reasons, and I'm just going to cut off one slice of it today and talk to you about skills and assigning what I call the right change skills to your change initiative at the right time. So for each one in that bubble map, this is obviously going to take a lot of planning. This could take 6 months. This could take 2 years. Culture change, we know, takes 5 to 7 years to do it right. Got to start mapping this out, right? So the right change skills to the change initiative at the right time. So you can probably already get a sense that this can be challenging, right? What we also know is that knowledge about change is not enough. I'm going to differentiate between knowledge and skills. Now, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be reading books or reading the newspaper or reading Harvard Business Review. Quite the opposite. We do need to have knowledge, but we need skills as well. And far too often, we stop at that knowledge piece. Oh, I just read a great article, or I just hired a new MBA and they've got all the stuff, right? Businesses hire MBAs as their principal recruiting pool. We know that. But I can tell you, because I have an MBA and because I teach MBAs, that what we're doing in MBA land is not enough. And that's why I'm doing this, is because we clearly need to take it to that next level of skills, right? So, I'm going to start using some examples from other parts of our lives. Do we have any golfers in the room? Let's see hands. All right, a number of golfers. So here's where I can explain between knowledge and skills. If you sit and watch the Golf Channel, you think, yeah, I see what he's doing with that chip shot, Arnie Palmer, right? Yeah, I know that he needs to be using the 7 club or whatever is used for that chip shot. This is knowledge. And then we go out on Monday morning and we're deciding if we're going to golf. Man, we can't do that. But I know what club to use, right? We don't have the skills, right? So knowledge and watching the Golf Channel, etc., is important, but it's not enough. I love to curl. Do we have any curlers in the room? Just me, eh? Just me. All right, so this is interesting for me. In Canada, in Ottawa, we couldn't get into a curling club. It was so busy, so popular. So we came here, moved into St. Paul first of all. Guess what? We got into the St. Paul Curling Club. Whoa, I'm going to do this now. I've been watching this on TV forever. I went and got all the right clothes and the right shoes, and I'm thinking, I know this. When I got down in the hack, like this fellow is, I couldn't do this. Even getting into this position is tough, right? So once again, I had the knowledge, and I looked the part. I didn't have the skills. It's the same in our organizations. The same thing, right? I'm going to broaden it a bit. Now, I assume we've got a couple of football fans in here. And I won't ask you what color you like, but I picked the 2 colors that I thought might work for this group, right? We're now going to broaden this concept out to think about when the Packers and the Vikings, when they're hiring their people, what skills are they looking for to make it to the big leagues? So give me a few examples of skills for football players on this field. Just shout them out. Speed, okay. What else?
Strength.
Strength.
Blocking.
Blocking, all right.
Accuracy.
Accuracy. Great.
Tackling.
Tackling,
Holding onto the ball.
Oh. What else? Couple more.
Thinking.
Thinking.
Learning.
Learning. In terms of specific positions, we need a quarterback, right? So somebody who's got the skill to throw the ball, right?
Preferably not one from another team.
Right? Quarterback, kicking, blocking. They're skills, right? Now, some of them will have, hopefully, all be thinking, but not everybody's going to be tackling. Your quarterback isn't tackling, right?
Hopefully not.
Your kicker is only on the field at certain times. This is an analogy to what's going on in organizations. We need the right skills on the field at the right time. We don't have everybody out there at once, right? So how do NFL teams approach skills? They hire for skills. They're not hiring because they've got a degree, because that degree is an example or a demonstration that they have knowledge, but your degree doesn't mean you've got any skills. Trust me. I know about this, right? I'm working with students and learners every day. They can cite and recite from books, but they may not have any skills at all. So NFL teams, the good ones, we want to be in the big leagues, we want to be successful, like the big leagues in the NFL. We're going to hire for skills, and we're going to put the right skills on the field at the right time. The same thing that I've been talking to you about in business. Make sense? It's inconceivable that the NFL wouldn't be looking for skills. Okay? Now, I had a hunch about 10 years ago, and I had a hunch that from my own experience in different organizations, I had a hunch that they weren't doing enough around skills. So I decided to do some research in this area, and I led an international research team to go out and talk to people in different organizations, different businesses in different parts of the world. I'm going to quickly tell you about that. I'm going to tell you what we found in our research, and we're the only ones that we know of who have done research in this area. And we're continuing doing research because we're so fascinated with the responses. Up to 120 people in different parts of the world, so it's statistically significant research, all people involved in change, and the vast majority could not identify many change skills at all. Think about that. Wow. We had about 10% of that group who were able to come up with these skills: communication, managing the change process, having some skills in interpersonal and social, having a vision, that's a skill, and leadership change. But only about 10% of the people we talked to came up with those. Very interesting. But when we told them about the 11 buckets of change skills that you have on a sheet for me on your table, the 11 buckets of change skills, we said, this is what we found in the academic literature. Tell us, does this make sense? Because we all know that everything that we read in the academic literature doesn't always make sense. And here's what we found. The vast majority of people that we talked to said that these 11 sets of skills are important. The average length of time these people had been working in organizations, 28 years. We're not talking about young people right out of school. 28 years on average is the experience they had. So they told us the vast majority agreed that all 11 sets of skills are important, but they also told us that they're not thinking about getting the right skills and putting them in their change initiatives at the right time. Yeah?
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a good question. We think, we're not sure, and that will be another phase in our research, but it seems that they're just running so hard to deal with the change that they're not consciously thinking about this thing called skills. They're often equating, oh, I'm hiring somebody out of the best school or whatever, and therefore they've got to know this stuff. Yes, they're not differentiating between knowledge and skills. Make sense? Right? So here are the 11, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly with you. You've got them here with a definition, and these are in no particular order. So first of all, we need to define what is our vision for this. Where do we want to be going? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Oh, we're going to open up that Dallas office. That's pretty concrete, right? We know what it is and we know when it's going to be over, but we have to define it, we have to move forward with that vision. Leading change. There are a number of skills around leading change, and if you're a leader in your organization, You know that this is going out and inspiring people. You've got to be motivational. You've got to get them to buy into what you're asking them to do. You've got to make difficult decisions. These are skills, right? There's a lot packed into leading change. Securing resources. I know we've got some bankers and accountants in the room today. We've got to make sure we've got the adequate resources for our change initiative, or we're probably going to be hurting before we even get out of the block. If we don't have enough people, we don't have enough money. That's surprising to me. I'm an accountant. When I started seeing this one coming up, this was surprising to me. They're starting change initiatives knowing that they don't have enough money to do it. That's not very much recognized as a recipe for success in my mind. Managing the change process. So these are more detailed plans. This is tracking what's going on. Are we on target? As an example of managing the change process. Preventing resistance and conflict. This is a big one because we all know that not everybody is crazy about change to start with, and most of us will have some questions and maybe some resistance to the direction that we're going in. We need to have effective skills in handling that, as well as related to conflict. I'm a believer that some level of conflict in organizations is a good thing, or else we're going to have everybody, groupthink. But it has to be effectively managed. And when change is underway, we know that there's a lot of conflict, either overt conflict or buried conflict, right? So we need skills around this. Building coalitions and networks. These are people-related things. We need to get out there. First thing I do when I go into an organization is to try to understand who supports this change. I want to go and talk to them. I want to find out why they support it. And I want to try to make sure that they're going out and they're talking to others and spreading that message, right? And communicating networks. We need skills in these areas. These are all discrete skill sets like being a quarterback, holding, tackling, blocking. Actively communicating. We know from the literature for the past 30 years that it's important to communicate effectively. Kind of sounds like motherhood and apple pie, right? But we also know that we're still not doing a good job of this, generally speaking. So on the list on your table, it talks about different ways of communicating, verbally, conversations, email, in writing, webinars, however, whatever makes sense in your organization. We need a broad range of communication at the beginning and throughout your whole change initiative. This is a big, hairy deal. Actively and appropriately communicating. Developing relationships. It's not enough for me to just go out and say, Rich, I want to talk to you about this. I need to have a relationship with Rich because I've identified Rich as a key player in this. And I need to be willing to listen to what he has to say. Right? So relationships. Sitting in a corner office and sending out emails usually isn't very effective. Right? Relationships. Managing power in politics. This is one that many of us don't like to talk about. It's one of those things, I hate organizational politics. I'm not going to talk about that. It's going on. Some organizations are more political than others, but we need to be recognizing what's going on. We need to recognize the power, and we need to be able to effectively handle the power and the politics in the organization. This is a tough one. Constantly assessing the internal and external environment, right? Depending on how long the change initiative is going on. If you've got something that's going to take a year, things can change drastically. Both outside, we talked about regulations, for example. Things can change drastically overnight. We have to be constantly handling that assessment of what's going on both outside and internally, and we need skills to do that. And the last one, easier said than done. We need to build trust, right? Build trust. So Bob, I'm asking you to go on this ride with me. We're going to be affecting this change. And I'm asking you to trust that it's all going to move the organization in a better direction. You're probably not going to trust me right off the bat with that. I have to work with you so that you develop that skill. You recognize my skill in doing that, and then you come on board, right? Trust, developing and maintaining trusting relationships. So a lot of what you see in here are soft skills, people-related skills. The project management stuff is usually much easier to handle, much more concrete. I have people say to me, you know, Karen, my business would be great if I didn't have to worry about the people. Those darn people, right? A lot of these skills are people-related skills, and a lot of them overlap, right? So as you're thinking about your change initiative, I'd like you to be thinking about who do you have on it, who's got the skill, and when do they need to be on it, depending on how big it is, how long it is. This takes time, it takes planning. So now that you know what the 11 sets of skills are, what do you do with this? How do you move forward? So hopefully by now, I've communicated to you effectively enough why skills are important, what the skills are. Now how do you get them? To assign the right change skills to the change initiative at the right time. In the short term, I'm going to split this up for you from a short-term and long-term perspective. In the short term, when you go back to your office today, this afternoon, look inside. Hopefully you've got some people already who are doing a great job in some of these areas. Remember, not everybody has all of these skills. So look inside first. And it's not just about who read that book or who has that degree, but who has the skills. So this requires an honest assessment, right? If you don't have the skills in-house, look at retaining them from the outside, right? You have to have these skills, one way or the other. So that's a short-term approach. When you're recruiting, and you've probably all got some recruiting going on in your organizations, if not today, maybe next week or next month, start to recruit for skills. Ask them, what have you done around change? Tell me about it. Get a sense of what their skills are, and make this part of your hiring decision. Effective immediately. Recognize what you've already got, where you've got some holes, and start to fill those holes as you can through your recruiting efforts. So that's short term. Longer term, what can you do? Well, how do we get skills? We can go out there and try it, trial and error, and that's a lot of what's going on in organizations now, and that's a lot of why we've got a 70% failure rate. We know that. But it is a way that you can get skills. We've all got to start somewhere, right? So that's one way. Another way is to buddy up with someone internally who has the skills. Take a hard look in your organization, and you've undoubtedly, there's stuff going quite nicely in your organization. Look for people who have these skills and see if you can ask them to be your mentor, buddy up with them, pair up people, right? Shoulder to shoulder. So that's another way. Another way is you can hire skilled internal coaches and external coaches. So I'm advocating these, depending on the size of your organization, it all needs to make sense, right? So if you don't have a lot of change going on, or if you've got it under control and periodically you need help, periodically hire a consultant who's got those skills, or hire a coach who can help. But if you're in a larger organization, you've got a lot of change going on, develop them internally. This will give you a leg up in your business. So as I wrap up, I'm asking you to think about, now that you know why skills are important, what the skills are, and how to get them, what are you thinking you're going to do when you get back to the office? around this. This is something you can move on, start moving on this afternoon. Okay? Questions? I've got a couple minutes left, Jeff tells me.
Could you say about a few more times?
See, I don't see that. Did Jim tell you to say that? Jim is always pulling my leg on about. I don't know. I don't get it.
Say about a few more times. Or a.
A?
A.
I'm working on that, eh? You know, I really work on that.
Karen,
Yeah.
are there assessments available to say, okay, I want to take one of those skills? Are there assessments? I mean, it's one thing to just say, are you good at change management? Of course I am.
Yeah.
So how do I confirm that I'm hiring for this particular skill that they
Yeah.
actually have it?
I believe that the best assessment, Jeff, is to talk to a reference, right? That's the best way. Yes, there are assessments. We have an assessment for all of these. Other organizations will have an assessment for some of them. I think your best way, when you're looking at hiring internally or externally, either employees or consultants or coaches, is references. You now have information on these 11 buckets. You can start to ask specifically, can you tell me about how you handled this, right? That's the best assessment, I think, but if you want assessments, yeah, there are some out there.
You have an assessment that I would get on a scale of 0 to 10 on each one of these, where you rank against the best
Yeah, yeah,
skilled
exactly. We
performers.
have that. Yeah.
And then once you identify it, you have methods to enhance or nurture those skills?
Yeah, it starts with knowledge. You've heard me dissing knowledge a bit, books and whatever, and I need to be clear. I'm not saying please don't read any more books or don't read the Wall Street Journal. You need the knowledge, but you also need those skills, right? So how do you go about that? First get the knowledge and then start to work on these specific areas. As I said, buddy up with somebody or hire a coach is the best way and the only way we've seen anywhere that this can be done. Trial and error, you can do that. You've got a bright light in your organization, you think they're going to do well. Put them out on something that isn't the end of the world if it doesn't work. It's like when you start to drive a car. It's a few times, right? So you can put them out on their own, trial and error, or you can buddy them up with somebody or hire a coach. But it is getting behind the wheel of a car and getting out there and doing it at the end of the day. That's when you'll know whether you've got the skills, right? Rich?
Can you talk a little bit about addressing generational differences and accepting and adapting to change?
For sure. And yeah, so we bump into this all the time. We're doing a lot of work with millennials right now, right? And we know that millennials like to learn certain ways. Millennials like to go out and do trial and error, right? And they'll jump in both feet. And hopefully they don't mess up too badly and we're all still surviving. Older generation is a different matter. Often older generation will be very passive resistors. If they're 50 plus, they don't want to be speaking out because they're afraid that, if they speak out, they may not. So you have to treat the different generations in different ways. And I think one of the best ways to deal with this is to have conversations, get to know your people, give them some safety, right? A question that I love to ask when I see someone resisting change, for example, is, we've decided we're going in this direction, or your company's decided. You're telling me you're not crazy, but what's it going to take to get you ready for this change? That is a magical question, if it's done in a safe, trusting environment, right? But you're right, different generations will handle this differently. It depends on how close they are to retirement, right? A lot of factors. Make sense?
One more question.
One more question, Jim?
Thinking of the last skill of building trust, that's one that strikes me as something that I think you need to have a temperament or a personality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't just learn skills. And to what extent are the 11 things that anybody can learn versus you need to have someone who's a certain kind of person
Mhm.
to begin with?
Authenticity, when you talk about building trust, authenticity is a big part of this. Walking the talk is a big part of this. If you're a leader who goes out and says, one thing and tomorrow you're demonstrating something else, you're not building trust, right? And being that real authentic person. These are fairly deep topics and don't have time to give you an in-depth, but I'd be happy to talk to you more about it. But I appreciate your point, right? And because I say trust me, doesn't mean anybody's going to trust me. Trust is something that has to be earned, obviously. So watch how you're behaving in your organizations. Are you walking the talk? Because if you're not, people smell that 10 miles away and they won't trust you and they may become a passive resistor, right? Make sense?
Let's thank Karen for her.
All right.
So in addition to the huge paycheck that you'll get in the mail, we have this
Thank you.
wonderful neon shark cutting board that we've had custom made.
Thank you very much.
This represents the neon shark is something my father gave me, and it really is a reminder to me of the values and all the things that he shared with me.
All right. Well,
So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it.